Hello, I'm Lloyd Cheney and I want to welcome you to Ringmaster Wood Turning. We're located here at my Ringmaster Wood Turning School, which is in Melbourne, Florida. At my school I offer a basic course of instruction which is 1 day long, one-on-one, and costs $199. You're about to receive the very same training. Okay, now we're actually ready to begin. First thing we need is material. Well, the material in this case is hardwood. This is a board of the Murado here, and this is properly called stock. We'll learn the correct terminology. This is 1 inch thick. This is called 4/4 stock. If you were to check it, it's actually a little over 1 inch thick. And that's when it's rough cut at the mill. Usually when you order it, this is how it'll come. And what it needs to be done at this point is to get it surfaced so it's nice and smooth. And it's surfaced with a machine called a planer. Normally I don't have one myself. I bring it down to a local mill and they plane it for me, or a wood shop. When it is surfaced, now what I'm going to use for demonstration purposes is this piece of bird's eye maple, because it is lighter and it'll be easier to see the pencil marks. But if you were to check this, after it's surfaced, it's 7/8 inch, and that's what I prefer to tell the people at the wood shop that's planing it to surface it to. I find 7/8 inch stock works best for the technique we're using, although it can be from anything from up to about 15/16 of an inch you can use. Next step is to check the board before we mark it up, and what's most important is the very end of the board. You've got to visually look at it, make sure there's no cracks. The correct word there is checks. You want to make sure you don't see any visible there, and just to be on the safe side, when I start marking this off, get my pencil, I usually take my square and about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in, I'll mark it off so I know I have a true right angle, and I'm eliminating might be little microscopic checks at the end here. Next step is to get it cut to workable sizes, and we're going to need 4 pieces. What I usually do is check the width of the wood. In this case it's 5 3/4 inch. So to mark squares off and make the most use of the wood, I'll mark 5 3/4 inch distances off. So that would be 1 piece, 5 3/4. There would be a second piece, and a third piece, and a fourth piece. So once you've got your markings done, then you get your square, draw your lines, like that. So there we have 4 pieces marked off, and that's going to be the stock that we would use. I will say one thing is, when you mark your wood, make sure you visually inspect it to make sure that there is no knots or cracks or other defects in the wood that you wouldn't want to be working with. If there was, then mark your pieces around that to avoid them. And when you're looking at it, make sure you look at both sides. This side might look very good and clean, and the back side might have some defect on it. So make sure you visually inspect the whole piece before you start marking it up. Next step is to get your steel measure and just draw crosshairs from each opposite corner. And the reason we're doing this is to get a true center. When we mount this on the lathe, the ringmaster, we need to drill a hole which is dead center. So there we have our 4 pieces with a crosshair shown. And then to make it a little easier when we're drilling that hole in the middle to find the mark, I take the awl and I lightly mark a little hole or indentation at the center of the crosshairs there for the drill bit to go into. The next step is to take a compass, standard school type compass, and measure the outermost point of each square and then just scribe a circle. And you'll see what this is used for in a moment. And there's our circles. Reason for drawing the circles is when we mount our stock on a ringmaster, there's cutting blades there. And if they were squared edges, the edges would be catching the inside of the mount here, and we want to get rid of them so we have the clearance. And to make sure that we don't cut into the actual usable material, which would be the circular part, we scribe that circle. And then you just take a straight edge and just mark about a 45-degree angle about a 1/4 inch from the circle. Don't go all the way up to the edge of the circle. And again, this isn't rocket science. You're just approximating. Doesn't have to be exact. So there we have our circles, and we've got our marks on the edges, on the corners, where we're going to cut them off. The next step, and I'm not going to do it here in the interest of time, but it's just to cut each of these vertical lines so we have our 4 sections. So the next step would be to cut it into 4 pieces, and you'll end up with these, and then the next step would be to cut your corners off, and you'll end up just what we have here. Now you'll notice this one's smaller. I do that because the design we're making, this is only going to be for the neck piece, and I already know that it's only going to need a 3-inch piece. And because this wood is much more expensive, I planned when I marked it out for that last piece to be smaller, so that extra material I could use for another project. So we have our 4 pieces here. The next thing to do is drill the hole. And once we're done with that, then we're ready to mount it on the machine, and actually that's where the fun starts. All right, here we are at the drill, and the first thing I want to do is install a drill bit, which is a 1/2 inch brad point drill bit. And in a minute I'll show you why. First thing, install the bit. Next thing is adjust the table so that when the drill is extended to its fullest, you have the brad point just going through the bottom of the wood, but not the drill itself. And the reason for this is if you just went all the way through with a drill bit, you're going to split out the whole bottom of the piece. What you'll want to do, the best way to do it is just go ahead and do it, and I'll show you what happens. There's the hole you made with the awl that helps you find that point for the drill bit. And you drill until it ends where you adjusted the stop. And there you can see the little hole where the brad point came through. That shows you where you have to start on the backside to continue your hole, so you get a nice clean hole on both sides. So we're going to do that with all 4 pieces. And that's it. 4 nice clean holes. Now we've got our 4 pieces with a hole in it, and now we're ready to mount it on a Ringmaster and have the fun. Back at the workbench, we've got the holes drilled in our stock. Before we mount it on a Ringmaster to begin the cuts, there's one last mark that I want to show you that's very important. As we progress, you'll see the significance of it. And before I do that, I got to kind of describe how I reference different lines. We've got our crosshairs here. So you got 4 lines emanating off of the center hole, and when you're looking at it upright, this is the southeast. I'll reference that line as the northeast line here, the northwest line, and the southwest line here. And as far as quadrants, that would be a south quadrant, east quadrant, north quadrant, west quadrant. That's just for reference purposes, so we know, you know what I'm talking about. When we have our 4 pieces, we want a reference line, and what I'm going to do is on this first one here, I am going to go over the diagonal here to make it brighter, and then right next to the southeast line, I'm going to make it a double line, maybe a 1/16 of an inch spacing. And that'll be our reference line, and you'll be able to see the meaningfulness of that in a little while. The other 3, I'm going to make a double line on the southwest line, so I'm going to go over the initial line and then make the double line. So on each of these, it's going to be each of these last 3, it's going to be in the southwest line. So the initial one I've got in the southeast, these in the southwest. Now we're ready to mount it on a lathe. And mount it with the pencil marks to the outside. Put a washer on and a nut. Tighten it up. This wrench comes with the unit. And next thing we do, before we slide our unit, the cutting blades forward, we want to do several things. Number 1 is make sure our blades are a good alignment. When I align my blades, instead of the preset gauge, that is an optional piece of equipment that comes with the Ringmaster, I think it's just as easy to take that steel edge we've been using and use that to line up the blades. The tool holder that the blades set into are, you put the steel edge against it and just lay them so that they're nice and flush. And then you tighten up